I still remember that horrifying night, as if it happened yesterday. It was 1980, and I was spending my holidays at my uncle's house in the beautiful village of Los Llanos, South America. The village was surrounded by lush greenery and vast fields. People here had a habit of sleeping early, so after dinner, everyone went to bed. I lay in my bed, unable to sleep, just staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me. Suddenly, I heard loud cries of animals. The sound was terrifying and urgent. Curious and a little concerned, I got up and stepped outside. The noise was coming from the nearby animal shelter, where many cows were kept. As I looked up, I saw the sky was covered with dark clouds, signaling an approaching storm. I assumed the cows were panicked because of it. Wanting to help, I went to them and started leading them into the inner shelter one by one. However, I had never seen them so restless before. They were so agitated that it was extremely difficult for me to move them. Just as I managed to get some of the cows inside, a foul stench of rotten meat filled the air. The fewer the cows remained outside, the stronger the smell became. It was unbearable. When only 5 or 6 cows were left, my eyes caught something horrifying. Blood-soaked bones of an old cow lying on the ground. My heart stopped. I froze in place, unable to process what I was seeing. Then, out of sheer terror, I screamed. Before I could react or run, a chilling sound cut through the heavy rain. A whistle. A long, eerie whistle that echoed across the fields, piercing through the storm. And at that moment, I knew I was going to die, because I recognized that whistle. It belonged to El Silbon. I had heard many stories about El Silbon from my relatives. One, in particular, haunted me the most. The story of a man who had once encountered the creature. They said this man was riding his horse through the vast fields late at night, heading to an event. Suddenly, his horse tripped over something. When he got down to check, he found a deer's bone with pieces of flesh still clinging to it. Before he could make sense of it, a piercing whistle echoed in the distance. Panicked, he tried to get his horse up, but it was too late. He heard something massive land on a tree nearby. His blood ran cold. Then, out of nowhere, a bone struck his head with such force that his skull split open. He screamed in agony, calling for help, but it was useless. Standing before him was a monstrous 19-foot-tall figure, its skeletal face covered in decayed flesh, wearing a straw hat. The man had never seen anything so terrifying in his life. The creature carried a sack full of bones. Without hesitation, it pulled out a bone and began beating the man mercilessly. He begged for his life, but the creature showed no mercy. It started ripping bones from his body and consuming them. The next morning, villagers found his remains. Not a body, just a skeleton. They say that monstrous being was El Silbon, and to this day, it roams those lands, hunting for more victims. As I recalled this story, terror gripped my heart. And then I saw it. A massive 19-foot shadow stretched across the ground. And from that shadow, a towering figure emerged. It was even taller than its shadow. It wore a straw hat, and its mutilated flesh hung in shreds from its decayed body. I could hardly breathe. There was no doubt this was El Silbon. It started walking toward me. The sack on its back dripped with blood, and the sound of bones clashing inside grew louder. My heartbeat raced. I turned and ran, but El Silbon chased me, leaping from tree to tree like a monstrous predator. I screamed for help, but no one could hear me over the storm. Then, just as I thought my end had come, a loud barking noise filled the air. The moment El Silbon heard the dogs bark, It froze in terror. Its body shuddered, and then, just like that, it vanished into the night. I turned to see my loyal dog standing there, growling fiercely. It had heard my screams and had come running to save me. I collapsed in relief, realizing that if my dog hadn't been there that night, my bones would have ended up in El Silbon's sack. That night changed me forever. I couldn't stop thinking about El Silbon. The next morning, I asked my relatives and neighbors about the legend. What they told me was even more horrifying than my own encounter. They said El Silbon was once a spoiled boy who lived in this area during the 18th century. Since he was the only child in his family, his parents and grandfather gave him whatever he wanted. One day, he demanded deer meat for dinner, so his father took his hunting rifle and a sack and went into the forest. But when his father didn't return for a long time, the boy grew impatient. Furious, he grabbed a sharp kitchen knife his mother had given him for protection and went to find his father. Sometime later, he returned home. Not with his father, but with a sack full of meat, organs, and bones. He gave it to his mother, telling her it was deer meat. As she prepared to cook it, something felt off. She became suspicious and told her father-in-law. The boy's grandfather took him outside, tied him to a tree, and began whipping him mercilessly, demanding the truth. The boy finally confessed. And what he said was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. When he found his father in the forest, he was empty-handed. He hadn't been able to hunt a deer. Enraged, the boy killed his own father with the knife, then skinned him, chopped his body into pieces, and stuffed the remains into the sack. Hearing this, the grandfather became furious. He lashed the boy so brutally that his flesh peeled off his body. Then he poured chili and alcohol over his wounds, threw the sack of bones on his back, and unleashed 2 vicious dogs after him, banishing him to wander the earth forever. From that day on, the boy's cursed spirit roamed the land as El Silbon. The villagers told me that almost everyone in the region had encountered him at least once. He was said to sit in trees, whistling in an eerie, bone-chilling way. He hunted those who wandered the fields at night, attacking them like a wild beast. But they also told me one important thing. He feared dogs. That's why every household in the region had dogs for protection. I survived that night only because of my dog. Otherwise, I would have become just another victim of El Silbon. If you enjoyed my terrifying encounter, subscribe to Weekend Shadows and stay tuned for spine-chilling horror stories every week.